He walked into the bank with confidence. No one would have ever guessed that he was the CEO of the bank. The bank manager was having the time of her life. She couldn't stop laughing. "Do you want me to pay $2? "Please ask me to do so," said the man. The bank manager was still laughing uncontrollably. The man had just entered the most exclusive bank branch in town. Dressed in a suit, he walked up to the counter and greeted the teller with a charming smile. All eyes were on him as he leaned in and confidently said, "I'd like to pay double whatever my balance is." The teller couldn't believe what she was hearing. She looked at the amount displayed on the screen and responded. Meanwhile, the bank manager, who was passing by the counter, caught wind of the conversation. She stopped in her tracks and let out a loud snort. Overhearing the interaction between the customer and the teller, she couldn't resist herself and started to walk towards them with a smirk on her face. As the manager approached the counter, the man calmly reached for his wallet without a hint of concern or anger. He pulled out his ID and placed it on the counter. Before anyone could react, the manager snatched the card from the table and scanned it with a confused expression. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she processed the name printed on the ID. C.E. "Oh," she read aloud, realizing the identity of the man who had been laughing at her. Meanwhile, the customer had noticed the change in the manager's demeanor. A playful smile crept onto his face as he watched her struggle to comprehend the situation. However, some customers nearby were unaware of the drama unfolding and continued to inquire about opening accounts with large initial deposits. Some even joked about bringing in several wheelbarrows of cash. In response, the manager simply rolled her eyes, annoyed by their lack of understanding. The scene had taken a dramatic turn. The man's calm and composed demeanor had concealed his true identity until now. As the realization of who he was dawned on the manager, the room fell silent, broken only by the sound of her racing heart. The weight of her actions crashed down on her, and she felt a surge of panic. His eyes, which had been twinkling with amusement just moments before, now held a cold authority that sent shivers down her spine. She knew she had made a terrible mistake. The realization of who he was hit her like a tidal wave, knocking the breath out of her lungs and leaving her frozen in place. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, stared back at him, searching for an explanation, a hint of understanding, anything that could salvage the situation she had so recklessly caused. But all she saw was the steely determination in his gaze. His composure was a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within her. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee, to disappear and hope that when he was gone, the nightmare she had created would somehow fade away. But she was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the fear that constricted her throat and stole her voice. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but no words came out. She was trapped in a silent scream, her internal turmoil echoing in the deafening quiet of the room. The silence stretched, becoming a tangible presence that pressed against her, suffocating her with its intensity. In that moment she wished she could rewind time, erase the memory of her foolish actions and start anew. If only she could undo the damage, undo the words that had poisoned the atmosphere, undo the image of her own incompetence that was seared into his eyes. The truth of the matter was that she was beyond regret. She had laughed, mocked, and belittled him, all without realizing that she was dealing with the very person whose good graces she needed to navigate her life. Her arrogance. Ancia's shield had become a liability, exposing her vulnerabilities and threatening her very position within the company. She had always prided herself in her quick wit, her ability to banter and jest without causing offense. But in this instance, her tongue had betrayed her, weaving a web of humiliation that now threatened to consume her. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, a leaden cloak stifling her movements and clouding her thoughts. Her knees trembled, threatening to give way beneath her. Her hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms as she fought to maintain her composure. But it was a losing battle. With each passing moment, the facade she had so carefully constructed crumbled, revealing the fear and desperation that lay beneath. Her eyes, pools of anguish, pleaded for mercy, for understanding, for forgiveness. But he offered none of those things. Instead, his gaze remained fixed, unwavering, a silent reproach that tore at her soul. She could feel his disappointment like a physical blow, each second stretching into an eternity as she grappled with the gravity of her mistake. And then he spoke, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that reverberated through the room. "I think it's time we had a little chat. don't you?" His words hung in the air, heavy with implication, leaving her with no doubt as to the fate that awaited her. Her mind reeled, trying to grasp the magnitude of the disaster she had created. Her career, her reputation, her very livelihood hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a precipice. She had never felt so exposed. So vulnerable, utterly defeated. He stood up straight, his posture radiating authority and power. His eyes, sharp and penetrating, seemed to bore into her, dissecting her every thought, every feeling, every fear. She could sense his disappointment, his disgust, his disdain, and it was a torment worse than any punishment he could have inflicted. "I expected better from you, to be honest," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, leaving no room for argument or excuse. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, to beg for another chance, but the words caught in her throat. Strangled by the weight of her own guilt, there was no excuse, no justification for her behavior. She had been arrogant, condescending, and plain wrong. He took a step closer, his presence filling her vision, consuming her thoughts. His gaze, intense and unrelenting, left her trembling, her body responding involuntarily to the magnetic pull of his authority. The distance between them, both physical and emotional, seemed to shrink, collapsing the barriers she had so carefully constructed. She felt stripped bare, her defenses shattered, her resolve crumbling under the relentless pressure of his stare. His silence was deafening, amplifying her fears, magnifying her regrets. Each second ticked by like an agonizing heartbeat, emphasizing the gravity of her misstep. His eyes, windows to his soul, revealed nothing, leaving her to grapple with the uncertainty of his thoughts, his feelings, his intentions. Was she to be reprimanded, fired, shunned? The possibilities, like vultures, circled, waiting to feast on her shattered career. The strength draining from her limbs, she fought to maintain her footing, to keep from collapsing, to keep from breaking down. But it was a losing battle. The floor beneath her feet seemed to dissolve, threatening to swallow her whole, and she felt tears stinging her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked them back, refusing to show weakness, refusing to give in. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, a sad, wistful smile that tugged at her heartstrings, reminding her of a humanity she had forgotten existed. "You know what? I understand that you didn't know who I was, but you should have known that you can't treat people like that. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their status or appearance. That's something my father taught me, and it's a lesson I've carried with me throughout my life." His voice, though soft, held a world of wisdom. A lifetime of experience distilled into a few simple words. She searched his face, hoping to find a glimmer of understanding, a flicker of forgiveness. But all she saw was the sadness in his eyes, the deep, soul-penetrating sadness that mirrored the turmoil in her own heart. "But you're right," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm sorry. I let my arrogance and ignorance get the better of me, and I deeply regret my actions." Her words tumbled out, desperate, sincere, a torrent of remorse. Unleashed, she had never felt such profound regret, such overwhelming shame. He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. She could not tell if he had accepted her apology, if he had forgiven her, but she clung to the possibility, nurtured it with all her might. The silence returned, enveloping them in its stillness, pressing in on all sides. It was a silence filled with unspoken understanding, with shared grief, with the weight of consequences. She knew that her actions had repercussions, that her arrogance had consequences. He sighed, the sound heavy with weariness, with disappointment, with the burden of leadership. "I believe in second chances," he finally said, his voice resonating with the weight of his conviction. "But actions have consequences. And while I accept your apology, I cannot overlook the breach of professionalism." His words were a lifeline thrown into the sea of her despair, a beacon of hope in the darkness of her guilt. She grasped it tightly, squeezing it like a life raft. "I understand," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" His gaze softened, a hint of compassion touching his features, reminding her of the humanity that resided within him. "You will take a leave of absence," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. You will have time to reflect on your actions, to learn, to grow, and most importantly, to understand the gravity of the trust you have violated. Her shoulders slumped, the weight of his words settling upon her like a heavy cloak. She knew he was right. She had violated that trust, and it would take more than apologies to repair the damage.